So if you could tell us, Amy, what are carbohydrates?
Well, in the context of food, carbohydrates are molecules that are found in a variety of different kinds of food, and they generally provide structure. Like in a plant, it might be some of the fibers that actually make up the physical structure and shape of the plant. Some of it is energy storage, like in a fruit. That's basically the energy storage in a underground tuber or root. It's the energy storage. That's sort of the very high level of carbs.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so with those components of carbohydrates, we know there's kind of like different types. So can you talk to us about like the different types? We know like sugar and starch, and a lot of people don't even really consider like fiber being a carbohydrate. Can you tell us like the difference between the different types of carbohydrates?
Yeah, there's so many different kinds. There's some people like to sort of very oversimplify, in my opinion, into simple carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates. Simple being, sort of smaller molecules or one or two kinds of carbohydrate put together. So like sucrose, for example, what we think of as table sugar, like white sugar in a 5-pound bag, that is two kinds of sugars put together. It's glucose and fructose. There is lactose, which is the sugar found in milk. That's glucose and galactose. Those are all different forms of simple sugar, simple carbohydrate. More complex carbohydrates are things like starch or various fibers. And starch is really just lots and lots and lots of glucose molecules strung together, and it has a very particular shape. And there's different kinds of starch. There's amylose, there's amylopectin, and it's just the molecular structure, the shape of the molecule is different. And that affects the way we digest them. It affects kind of the impact on blood sugar. There are, like you said, fiber, and there's a lot of different kinds of fiber. Just a lot, so many different kinds that all have slightly different effects. They provide slightly different properties to these different foods that we would eat. Or, for example, like things in beans. The reason beans are so problematic for some people and they cause, gas and bloating and flatulence is because of the particular kinds of carbohydrates they contain. Two of them that come to mind, or we don't hear these words often, but raffinose and stachyose. They are a kind of carbohydrate that the digestive enzymes in the human body are not capable of breaking those particular bonds. So those sort of pass through the digestive system, not fully broken down. They arrive in the colon, and the gut flora, the colonic bacteria, go to work on those fibers and on those, undigested and semi-digested carbs. And the result of that is all the gas and bloating. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but that's why it happens, because the enzymes in the human digestive tract are only capable of breaking down certain forms of carbohydrate.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I go back to my question and ask you about sugars and starch and fiber. And what a gross oversimplification. You're able to talk about all kinds of different carbohydrates, and we really should be thinking about all of them. But generally speaking, like what kind of advice would you give to most people that you work with when it comes to carbohydrates, especially related to your book, End Your Carb Confusion? What are some of the things that help people practically when they're thinking about how to consume carbohydrates in their diet?
Well, of course, I specialize in low carbohydrate and ketogenic diets. So most people coming to me are either already eating very little carbohydrate or they want to adopt that kind of way of eating. So I help people with obesity, type 2 diabetes, PCOS, metabolic syndrome, all that stuff. So most of those people do really well on a very low carb diet. And so the kinds of carbohydrate they would eat would be the ones that are the least likely to really elevate blood sugar and insulin. So things like broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, mushrooms, lettuce. These, we don't typically think of lettuce as a carbohydrate, but it is. Like if you hear the word carbs or carbohydrate, you kind of automatically think of bread and pasta and rice and potatoes. But all vegetables are carbohydrate. They just happen to not have a lot of starch. And Same thing with fruit. Fruit is a carbohydrate, and it's everybody's carbohydrate tolerance differs, and that's exactly what our book is about, End Your Carb Confusion. Some people can have lots of starch and even a little bit of sugar in their diet, and they're fine. They're healthy, they're lean, they feel well. For other people, they have to go really low. So most of the people who come to me, like I said, the carbs they're going to eat are going to be the non-starchy vegetables. And maybe, there's trace amounts of carbohydrate in certain dairy products, and some people can tolerate a small amount of berries. But beyond that general principle of just lower carb, then everyone has to individualize for themselves.
Gotcha. And you guys in your book, you talk about three different levels that kind of correspond to the tolerance for people in carbohydrates. Can you talk a little bit about those three different levels?
Yeah, the lowest level is 20 total grams of carbohydrate per day. So it's really low. It is based on Dr. Westman's 20 years of clinical experience as a physician. And that is intended to be a ketogenic diet. That's very low. It's low enough that just about everybody who eats that low a level of carbohydrate is going to be in ketosis. And not everybody needs that, though. The next level up is 50 total grams, which is still a very low carb diet, in my opinion. Some people will be in ketosis eating that much carbohydrate, some won't. And then the third level is 150 grams. That's really for much more active people, people that are already lean, people that don't have any health problems. But we actually do recommend that even if you don't have any health issues or you're not overweight, you might experiment for a few weeks or months, starting at phase one, which is that lowest ketogenic 20 total grams, because you might just feel better than you've ever felt. You might think you're doing really well until you feel even better. So we actually recommend, it's not required, but we recommend that people start lower, see how they do, and then they can increase if they want to. But there are certain, I think, effects that you will get at that level, that super low carb intake, that you're not going to get at a higher level. So it's worth trying. It's worth experimenting with.
Yeah, that's right. So, in your experience, taking as many people through this process as you have in your career, I would like to know, first of all, do you know of many, or I would say even any instances where you didn't get the desired outcome that the person wanted, first of all? And then the second question is, what do you notice about people that say, like, I could never go without my favorite bread? I could never go without rice every dinner. I love the cookie store down the street, and I have to wash it down with a bucket of soda. Like, what do you tell those people?
Wow, lots of different things. So the first question, generally, if people aren't getting the results they want, we really just have to make a change somewhere. We have to tweak something. We have to personalize it in some way for them. Just because a particular food is low in carbohydrate, somebody still might have a sensitivity to it, or somebody still might react to it in a way that it's not the best thing for them to eat. I also see, specifically with weight loss, I think there's a lot of undiagnosed and improperly treated hypothyroidism out there. So even when somebody's doing the diet really well, they might still struggle to lose weight if they have like a genuine hormonal imbalance that's getting in the way. And also, just I will say, I've had clients whom I recommended to eat more carbohydrate. Like we said earlier, super strict keto is not the best for everybody. Everybody can eat a ketogenic diet. Not everybody needs to, and not everybody feels their best that way.
So important.
Yeah. Now, with regard to what was the other thing?
So the other question was, what was the other question?
Uh,
I always get in trouble by asking two at the same time. Has
I
anybody
know.
not seen good improvements? And second of all, for the people who, like,
Right.
they just can't fathom their life without carbohydrates.
Yeah, that depends on the situation. If somebody has type 2 diabetes or non-alcoholic fatty liver, or, hypertension, metabolic syndrome, are you really willing to trade that for a donut or a cookie? Like, you really you want to risk limb amputation, blindness, kidney dialysis, heart attack, early death, you really, that cookie is so delicious that it's worth you potentially losing a leg, potentially going blind, potentially being on dialysis, and making your family pick up the slack if you can no longer care for yourself. Like, oh, that's fair. I mean, that's a really harsh answer, but that's one. The other two other ways to look at this is, for most people, not everybody, but most people, if they just give it 30 days, give it a month, most people really do find they don't miss those foods as much as they thought they would. They really don't. The sugar cravings do go away. The carb cravings do go away. And they start to feel so good without those foods that they don't want to go back. They said, I'm never going back. Why would I eat those foods that had me feeling so awful when I feel so good now? So that's another perspective. And then the other one is, you have to know how you're wired, but you could do very low carb or keto, 92% of the time. And once every 6 weeks, you do go to the cookie shop. Once, at Christmas, you do enjoy grandma's pie or whatever the thing is. You really can have these things on occasion, as long as you go right back to your normal lower carb diet. The issue with that is the slippery slope thing. There are some people who can have one cookie or one donut or even a whole meal. That's how, go to your favorite Mexican place and you eat the chips and you eat the rice and beans, and then they get right back on plan. For other people, that one meal leads to an 8-week bender and they regain 15 pounds. The type 2 diabetes comes back. So sometimes that gets somebody's foot in the door. Hey, you don't have to give this up forever. Let's just see what happens for 30 days. And then they have the option of either, wow, I don't want to eat that stuff ever again anyway, or, okay, I feel really great doing this keto low carb diet, but I'm going to have my thing once in a great while.
I love that. I think that's wonderful advice. And I think what you said about knowing yourself is so important. I always thought I could moderate, and it turns out I really can't. I have to abstain. I just have to stay away. I don't have a choice. And it is interesting too. Like, I've got a client who had tremendous results with low carb and then fasting, and he lost a bunch of weight. His strength went up. He took a trip, overseas and let his diet go. And this was 4 years ago, and he has not recovered to this day. He gained all the weight back and then some. He struggles with all kinds of different health issues, and it's a real bummer to see. And it was like, yeah, you should go on this trip and you should go enjoy yourself and you should go and eat all these foods. But what if that's the thing that sends you back down the path you don't want to be?
That's exactly why it is a slippery slope, and you have to know how you're wired to whether that's safe for you to do, to have that little excursion every now and then, or whether you're better off never doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Well, this has been super informative. We really appreciate your contribution to this. If you don't mind, tell the listener where they can go to find you and connect with you and your amazing work.
Sure. My handle on most social media is Tuit Nutrition, TUIT Nutrition. That's my Twitter. That's my YouTube. My books. I do have a website, tuitnutrition.com, but it's in desperate need of overhaul. But you can contact me through there. My books you can find on Amazon. It's the End Your Carb Confusion, The Stall Slayer, which is about breaking fat loss stalls on
Yeah,
low carb diets, and my first book, The Alzheimer's Antidote, about Alzheimer's disease.
that's awesome. Well, we will link to all of that. Thank you, as always, so very much for that informative conversation.
Thank you.